Welcome back to GLBC Connections. One of the things that I really enjoy about what I do is having the opportunity to go see our students participate in sports. Last year we didn't have a spring sports season, but this year I've had the opportunity to see so many of our students perform in so many different ways. I've had the opportunity to go to track meets and baseball games and water polo matches. Tonight I'm going to my first lacrosse match. And of course, I've been to a lot of soccer games already this spring. That's something I go to throughout the year. But I'm always amazed and I'm always so impressed with our students because seeing them perform, seeing them compete, it is the culmination of so much hard work. It's the culmination of so much practice, the culmination of so much self-discipline, the culmination of so much of their passions that they put into these athletic competitions. And as I've been at these meets, I've been reminded that this is the summer of the Summer Olympics. We're just over 2 months away from Summer Olympics. And to think that right now, there are thousands upon thousands of men and women around the world who are training for the biggest competition of their lives. They are training to stand on that podium to receive a medal and to be officially acknowledged as the best in the world. The training that is taking place at this very moment blows my mind. Well, it's interesting to think about training and competition because it's not only something that's in our minds quite frequently, but it was something that was in the Apostle Paul's mind. You see, Paul knew of the Olympic Games as well. Not only that, but there was another set of games, the Isthmian Games, that took place in Corinth. Paul may have been there when those games were going on. So the idea of training, the idea of competing, the idea of winning a prize is very much at the forefront of Paul's mind and is at the forefront of the church in Corinth. It would have been something they saw and experienced every day. Well, it's no wonder that as Paul writes this letter that we call 1 Corinthians, he refers to athletic competition. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, beginning in verse 24. Listen to Paul's words. Do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. And he continues for a couple of more verses to emphasize the training, to emphasize the commitment, to emphasize the dedication, to emphasize the self-control that is necessary to win the prize. The question is, what prize is Paul talking about? Very often when we read this passage, our minds immediately go to the Olympic Games, and our minds immediately go to being an individual champion, to standing on that podium as an individual, receiving that gold medal, and being acknowledged as the best. So too often we read this passage and we say, well, Paul is talking to the individual Christian and talking about the individual Christian life and saying we must strive and put forth effort in the Christian life so that we can receive God's crown. But one thing we have to do when we're reading the Bible is we always have to take every passage we read within its context. Context determines meaning. And we are in the middle of a larger context of 1 Corinthians 8, 9, and 10. And that context is not about the individual Christian receiving a prize from God for how well they lived the Christian life. I'd like to take you back to Scott's devotional on 1 Corinthians chapter 8. Let me summarize it by reading verse 13. Therefore, Paul says, if what I eat causes my brother or sister to fall into sin, I will never eat meat again, so that I will not cause them to fall. Remember, one of the issues in Corinth is this idea of eating meat. And there was meat that was sacrificed to idols. And there were a group of Christians Paul calls the strong, that they had no problems eating meat. They said, look, idols, they don't even exist. They're not real. This meat is just meat. I am free to eat it. But then there was another group who had a hard time with that. They said, yeah, but the people who prepared that food thought they were preparing it for a god. And it's defiled, and I feel really uncomfortable eating that meat. Paul's solution is to say to the strong, you're right. You have the freedom to eat the meat, but don't use your freedom if it's going to cause your brother or sister to stumble. Look out for their best interests. And if that means sacrificing, foregoing eating the meat that you want, then that is your responsibility. Paul continues this line of thinking in 1 Corinthians chapter 9. He begins with a long discussion of him being an apostle, and it seems unrelated to meat, but it's not. You see, one of the accusations that the apostle Paul got when he was in Corinth was that he's probably not a very good apostle. Why? Because he didn't receive money. Other people had come in to get paid for their teachings, but Paul doesn't accept any money. What does that say about Paul? Well, look at 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 18. What then is my reward? Just this, that in preaching the gospel, I may offer it free of charge, and so not make full use of my rights as a preacher of the gospel. You see, Paul basically says the same thing in chapter 9 that he says about 8. Look, I have a right to receive money for my preaching and teaching and ministry to you, but I've refused it. I've refused it because I don't want anybody to accuse me that I'm only preaching for money. So I am setting aside my rights for your benefit. Then Paul goes into a little discussion of evangelism, a little discussion about how he reaches out to people. And this is a very familiar passage. Verse 22, to the weak I became weak to win the weak. I've become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some. I do all this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings. Paul, again, here talks about sacrificing for the benefit of others. He says, when I'm talking to the Jews, I'm going to live and speak in a Jewish way. When I'm talking to Gentiles, I will live and speak in a Gentile way. Why do I do this? I'm sacrificing myself for the benefit of others. It's in this context that Paul turns to this athletic, self-control, dedication metaphor. And it's important because Paul's not done with this issue. You'll hear in Pastor Andrew's devotional on chapter 10 that he's continuing to talk about this idea of, yes, we are free, but we do not use our freedoms to indulge ourselves. Rather, we use self-control and we restrain our use of freedoms for the benefit of others. So what I'd like you to do today is to reread this athletic metaphor in that context. Reread 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 24 to 27. Not with ourselves and our own Christian rewards and our own Christian effort in mind, but read it with the thing in mind that Paul has been talking about self-control for the sake of others. Sacrifice for the sake of others. Paul is saying that is what we must strive for. And that takes discipline. That takes effort. That takes practice if we are going to accomplish our goal. Have a great day.